Okie dokie. Hey everyone, it's Bubbles. Yeah, I know you haven't seen me in a while, so hello, YouTube. I apologize again for the breaking uploads. I've just been very tired, and that makes it hard to edit and then upload. But I promise, I'm still going hard to make sure at least once a week you get Twitch, and I'm doing YouTube stuff behind the scenes even when you aren't getting uploads. So anyway. Speaking of one of those uploads, today, we're talking about the Skull Merchant. I have some feelings about this one. Some feelings that are different to the way everyone else is seeing this chapter. But they've been changing over time. The problem is that I'm seeing a lot of hate directed towards this chapter, like straight out the gate, that I feel like a lot of it's unwarranted. And I'd like to address that head on and address some of the criticism and explain why I think this chapter isn't as bad as it seems. But at the same time, I want to be very, very clear. I have come around on a lot of the things that a lot of the pros and a lot of influencers and a lot of just the general community have been saying. I don't think this is going to be a chapter that is horrendous, but it's going to be a chapter that doesn't really give us much, which is a shame because it promises a lot. It just doesn't deliver on it. But before we can really go into that, let's just quickly talk about what the chapter actually has. So this chapter has 3 separate characters, 1 map rework and 2 map reskins sort of thing. Which I suppose you can call reworks in their own right, but you just bear with me here. We got 2 new survivors. We got Thalita and we got Renato. They are, as I understand it, their brother and sister. And we got the 1 killer. We got the Skull Merchant. I admit, I actually do like the aesthetics of this chapter. I don't think they're as interesting as some of the previous chapters we had last year. But just already, I actually don't mind the physical design of these characters. My main concern, without looking at any perks, without looking at any powers whatsoever, is that these are 2 survivors who I feel like are going to get lost to time very quickly. As I understand it, a lot of people already plan on boycotting this chapter. And in addition to that, these characters do have various resemblances to previous characters that we really love. And I'm a little worried that they're going to get the Hattie treatment, whereby they're just not going to get cosmetics. Because they don't stand out the same way that Vittorio does, which is one of the few saving graces of the Knight chapter. That the Vittorio and the Knight, they both have very in-depth lore. They're both very interesting characters. They're characters that Behavior are putting a lot of effort into to make them stand out. So regardless of how you feel about their perks, about the power of the killer, that's why that chapter is in some cases being compared favorably compared to this one. But let's get into a little bit more about the survivors. So starting with Thalita. Thalita's perks are the ones I prefer of the 2 survivors. So we've got Friendly Competitor, which basically gives you a generator repair speed buff if you complete a generator with a friend. Which is alright. It's not anything crazy. It's only 5% and it's only for a 75-second window. So it isn't meta breaking, but it's another gen perk. So, you know, stack them up, make them work. You got Teamwork perk, which is Power of 2, where if you heal another survivor, you get a speed boost. They get a speed boost, you get a speed boost, and you keep that speed boost while you're within 12 meters of each other. Which is, it's alright. And Cut Loose is probably the most interesting one. This perk essentially makes it so that if you vault once in a chase, all vaults after that are quiet, so long as you do them within like a 6-second window. So you vault, and then if you vault back, that'll be quiet, and if you vault again, that'll be quiet, and then you keep doing that until the 6-second window has expired, which is quite cool. I actually think this is a cool, well-designed perk. It's going to be very confusing. It's going to allow survivors to play mind games a little bit. As for Renato, we have 3 perks of his own. We've got Blood Rush, which is honestly a weird perk. It basically makes it so that if you're on Death Hook, you can break yourself temporarily so that you get your exhaustion back. And then it will full heal you after 20 seconds. It basically just ensures that you've got a last hurrah if you're in Death Hook, which I actually quite like. It's quite a unique, different one, and I think they put a lot of care into making sure that this particular perk isn't too overpowered. It's all right. It's in a good spot where it is. You got another teamwork perk where basically if you get healed this time, the team of healer and shit, the person that healed you as well as yourself will get stealth, and you won't leave scratch marks. You won't leave and you won't leave scratch marks wherever you go, pretty much. Now we got background player, which basically it's getting reworked for the live servers. In the PTB, it made it so that if you unhook somebody, you gain a speed boost. The problem is they encourage tunneling. So whilst this isn't the final version I've got on screen, the final version is going to be mostly this, except it's going to be a 4-second speed boost for you when somebody gets downed, essentially. It should help with flashlight saves, but I don't see this one shattering the meta at all. As for the Skull Merchant, we'll cover the perks first, and then we'll go over the power. The perks are thwack, so if you break a pallet, everyone within a 32-meter radius will scream and show their aura for 4 seconds, which is it's a little bit like an infectious fright that you can kind of just hold on to. Except you need to hook somebody first before thwack can become active, though. You do need to hook somebody, so keep that in mind. Leverage is basically like a dying light, except it's just affecting healing speed. And there's no obsession requirement, which is quite cool. So one hook will add 5% more time to what it takes to heal, which is alright. But that's only within a 30-second window after somebody's been hooked. So there is a key element of you need to be constantly doing that hook stuff. And Game of Foot, basically, the survivor that you chase the most, if you hit them, will become the obsession. From then on, while you're chasing that obsession, kicking any pallet or breakable wall or anything, from then on, breaking any generators or breakable walls or pallets while in chase will give you a 5% haste status effect for 10 seconds. Which is actually kind of weirdly cool. I actually don't mind this. The only problem is that, again, it is an obsession perk, and it's going to kind of screw around with your ability to, 1, run other obsession perks, and 2, it's going to really mess around with... And 2, it's going to be hard to make this perk itself work without messing around with other stuff like Nemesis or Furtive Chase. We also have the Killer Power. So the Killer Power is called the Eyes in the Sky, and I like to think of this as the Death Garden style chapter, in that the new killer uses drones to essentially patrol the area to keep track of where people are. And that's the general vibe of it. It's very complicated, and it's a lot easier to watch in-game, so I'm not going to go over everything here and now. But basically, the killer has 4 drones. They can put those drones up wherever they want to. There's not really a slowdown to putting them up, so there's not really a disadvantage in that sense. Give them a couple of seconds, they'll become active. And while they're active, if you go in the zone of the drone, you'll become undetectable. And if other survivors come into that zone for too long, they will be able to be tracked by your radar, and they will also become exposed. If a drone doesn't detect a survivor for a long period of time, it will then go into scouting mode, where it have these weird yellow radars going around trying to find survivors. If a survivor can successfully avoid those yellow rays and get in there, they can hack the drone, and the drone will apply a claw trap to their arm. This claw trap basically activates any drone that they go in the radius of, as well as sometimes applying other effects. And then once the survivor has been away from drones for extended period of time, they can get rid of the claw trap. I get what behavior is trying to go for with this chapter. I really do. And I'm, to an extent, excited for this chapter. But there are some very clear issues with everything that's been put forward to us. Firstly, I will say, though, I'm really happy with the map rework for Shuttlewoods. It looks great. I'm going to show a clip of it here, the new building in the middle, which is actually really, really sick. I totally rate it. And they also have worked on the aesthetics of the Red Forest maps, and they both look absolutely amazing. As for the rest, I'll start with the perks. The perks themselves feel like filler perks, mostly. For the survivors, there are realistically a perk each that is their defining perk, the thing that will make them draw in people, hopefully. For Renato, that's probably going to be the Blood Rush perk, the one where he can injure himself to give himself exhaustion. For Thalita, it's going to be the Cut Loose perk, the one that makes her vaults quiet when she achieves certain criteria. The other perks realistically feel like slightly reworked versions of stuff we already have, or it's kind of like the meme of copying, like, hey, can I copy your homework? Sure, just make sure you change it a little. And that's what we got. We got a perk on Thalita that feels like a a poor man's Prove Thyself. We got a perk on Renato that gives him speed boosts at weird intervals when people have gone down and are getting picked up for some reason. And we have this weird teamwork gimmick, which seems like it's just based off of the idea that was introduced with Cheryl with Blood Pact. Quite literally, a few of the matches that we played in the little session I had on the PTB, we were literally trying to get Blood Pact to work with Thalita's teamwork perk to see if we could get the speed booster working. I suppose for a gimmicky sense, that's fine. It's fine. I don't mind having survivor perks that are weird and different and work in non-conventional ways and builds. The problem is that it feels more like they haven't put much effort. They've gone for quantity over quality with this chapter. They've added 2 survivors, and they expect that to be a good smokescreen for everything that this chapter is lacking. As for the killer perks, again, they aren't strong enough to stand on their own. This past year, say what you want about the killers that we've had in the last year, Onryo, Dredge, Wesker, Knight, they've all been received in very different ways. With like one of those being possibly the most popular killer ever to be released, and one of those possibly being the least popular. But they all came with interesting perks that allowed people that bought the DLC to actually be able to just take those perks and make interesting builds out of them. This update has given us 3 perks that are more in the gimmicky section for killer. I don't see Game Afoot really changing the way that killers play. Maybe I could see a Bobber making some kind of build around it where they get the speed boost to catch up and chainsaw somebody. But I don't see it being a big meta changer. I don't see Thwack getting any kind of use because it gives you aura reads and screams at a time that you probably aren't going to need to know where people are. Primarily when you're kicking things, you already know where people are. Or there's nowhere to hide, which already does the gen side of things for you. And it has a whole lot less requirements too. As for the last one, I love anti-heal perks. They're actually kind of fun. And I can see some ways this perk's going to be fun to use on stealth killers, but the problem is that it falls into the traps that Dying Light had, where it gives you most of its benefit at the end of a really good game, which is the last thing that you actually need. You want to try and prepare for the really tough matches. And this perk doesn't really do that, per se. Like I said, I'll be running this as stealth killers, because it is probably better for them than Chorophobia, which requires a terror radius. But they're disappointing. I'll still be picking up the DLC a lot for the perks, but they're disappointing perks, as a general rule of thumb. But let's talk about this killer power. I want to preface this by saying that this killer is better than the Knight. The Knight is atrocious, and if you think the Knight's better, you have fallen into a trap of not understanding fully what's wrong with the Knight. See, people are comparing the scanning of the drone to the way that Knight has his little guards walk around pallets and stuff, and arguing that it's essentially the same thing. The difference is that the Knight is not fun to play as, or against more rather than anything else, because it is death by impossible situations. Death by having a killer on one side and a guard on the other side and you get sandwiched. Or you get chased by a guard, there's a complete dead zone, so you have nowhere to go. So an AI takes you out. And there's nothing you can really do about that. I hate, basically, the way the Knight has been designed power-wise. Which is a real shame, because everything else about that chapter would have been fantastic if they nailed the power. But they haven't. And it's something that people need to realize is a problem whenever they add in extra AI helpers for the killers. It's a problem with Nemesis. I'm coming around a little bit on Nemesis only because of how weak the zombies are from a practical standpoint. But these guards are frustrating as fuck for no reason. This killer doesn't have that. I feel like this killer's biggest weakness is that it's a planning killer. It's a killer who needs to set up her stuff very early in the match and be constantly addressing the drones, setting them up, activating that one over there, activate that one over there, and planning things out. Realizing, okay, I need to go over this section, so let's activate this drone now, so that when I get there, I can walk inside the drone radius, I can get my stealth, I can then do stuff with that. I don't see people really trying to play her that way, though. I see people more rather playing the 3-gen strat, making sure you lock down an area and making sure no one can actually get into that area without your knowledge. And Scott Jund made a video where he basically showcased that. A custom match where he held the game, not hostage, or maybe, I don't know. Do you call that hostage holding? He didn't really commit. Well, he didn't really have to worry, because he just kept the area going and it was death by 1,000 cuts. Rather than clean, quick gameplay. I like the killer. I like the way that it borrows a lot of the Death Garden vibes. And I like the way that it's very strategic, but not in a way where you're placing traps on the ground and it just ends your chase. I like the fact that it's a killer that has to rely on the M1 ability. And I know that sounds like a weird thing. But the general idea for me is that I love killers where I have to show my skill of understanding the core mechanics of playing killer. When done right. When done wrong, it can be really bad. But a good example is Sadako. Sadako, you need to understand your potentials as an M1 killer who doesn't have a special attack that can win chases for you. You need to know how to mind game, you need to understand tiles and how they work, how survivors run them, and how to best try and counteract what they're trying to do. But the problem is that this killer is a very weirdly designed one lore-wise. It's not a super relatable one. I suppose a good way to look at it is to compare it to another killer that we've had in more recent years. And I know I've talked too much about last year's killers, so let me take the artist and let me take the Skull Merchant. The Skull Merchant is very much, it sounds like she's rich, a lot of inherited wealth. She doesn't sound very sympathetic. In her like, it's very money-based motivations, materialistic. It's not somebody that you really appreciate and like. Comparatively, if you look at the artist lore, we find out that she was an artist who had a whole bunch of stuff taken away from her, and that broke her down, to the point that she became an activist and she started speaking out against bad stuff happening in her communities, to the point that she got targeted and made into a disfigured human thing that the entity then cultivated and made into a fearsome warrior of the entity. And that story is so interesting, it's so cool. You really feel emotionally connected to Carmina, or Carmina. I don't know how you say her name, but it has everything that I feel like this Skull Merchant character is lacking. Some people have said that Behavior should even rework her lore. I don't know if that's necessary, but I've got a feeling they should make a tome on her reasonably quickly, to try and make her a much more likable character, because at the minute they haven't really done that. And I feel like that's problem number one. Problem number two is the complexity of it. There are just so many facets of these drones, and they don't feel very easy to use. It took me forever to realize that when somebody's getting detected by one of my drones, they're getting detected on this little radar thing that I'm carrying around with me. Then it's not a killer instinct like when they get caught by the active drones. It is not an aura read like some of the perks. It is very complex, and I imagine that it's going to give a lot of people a headache trying to play this killer. I think in general, this killer is going to be better than people think. She's still not going to be a high tier killer. She's still not going to be an overly popular killer for people to play. I will be playing her, and I will be attempting to try and do the same thing that I did with Knight, whereby I was trying to find a fun way to play Knight. With Knight, I determined that it was more about using his power to break pallets and shit, so that I could just focus on chasing. I'm willing to give this killer a shot, although I think I've already determined that this killer's main boons come from the fact that you can play her as a stealth killer, and people are not going to expect that. So then you can use that stealth element to hopefully catch people off guard, get some nurses calling gameplay out. That was one thing I did on my PTB experience, was run nurses calling and slow people cheering some anti-heal stuff, just so that I could get the sneak up, keep people injured, and play a hit and run gameplay sort of thing. Another element is going to be figuring out how to use the drones to expose people. Some people are saying it's too easy to get out of being exposed, but my counter argument would be that I like it like that. I prefer it like that. If it was too easy to expose somebody, people would be bitching about it. As it is, I think it's better that we have a slightly weaker thing, and it's more about using the drone to play mind games with people. You either risk getting exposed and now you have to play mind games trying to wear off the exposed state effect, or you take the hit early to try and get away from the drones so that you don't have to worry about it. My last complaint about the chapter would be the two survivors, because there is no logical reason why there had to be two survivors of this chapter. They could have killed one of them in the backstory of the other, and it probably would have had the same effect, to be honest. Gimmicky is the word that I'd use. Gimmicky in that they talk to each other. that I think Behavior is really proud of the fact they've got voice lines with each other where they interact in the menu screen. Their perks are gimmicky. The entire chapter just feels gimmicky. If I was to find a word that summarized everything that I'm looking at, it's not that it's bad or good or anything. It's gimmicky, and I feel like Behavior should have realized that. And it compares especially badly considering it's been less than a year since we had Wesker, who was a fantastic release. It also feels like maybe we're being compensated with 2 survivors because there's an upcoming chapter this year without survivors, and it's just going to be a killer. But if that's the case, I would have rather they handled it the way they handled Pinhead. Released Pinhead, and they released Michaela Reed later on as her own separate thing, and were able to put in time and work to make her fun own character, as opposed to, I don't know. I'm really worried for these 2 new survivors because I feel like they're going to disappear because people aren't going to play them. Partially because they won't have cosmetic options. But the fact that they added 2 survivors here, I feel like it's just going to make more people ask, okay, if this chapter deserved 2 survivors, why the hell is Chris Redfield just a skin? Why is Claire Redfield just a skin? Why is Sybil Bennett or Sybil Bennett just a skin? It makes no sense. There is no reason why these 2 survivors are separate survivors. Beyond just beefing up a chapter that they may have already suspected was not going to be received well. Okay, I think I've ranted enough. I will be experimenting with this killer anyway, and I think we will still have a lot of fun with her. Because again, it's not the Knight. If you're comparing her to the Knight and calling her worse, maybe in terms of strength, yes, you're correct. But in terms of fun, she's going to be a lot more fun. I'm hoping they do Death Garden cosmetics with her, because she's very Death Garden like, I guess. But beyond that, I'm going to end this video here. Thank you everyone for watching. There is going to be a second part to this, where I'm just going to showcase my PTB games. Weirdly, I played for hours on that PTB and didn't have many good ones, so it's been part of the reason why I've been sitting on this for a while. But I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think of the new killer, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.